Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching today's long-range U.S.-focused forecast video brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. This analysis is being provided for perspective only, and any decision made based upon this presentation is the sole responsibility of the person making the decision. Finally, please remember that all long-range weather forecasting is speculative by nature. We begin first by taking a look at the last 3 days here of total accumulated precipitation. I'm recording this pretty early in the morning, around 1 a.m. Here on Wednesday, and I'm looking first at the precipitation that we got out of Barry. So some localized very, very heavy rains, of course, moving through Louisiana, Mississippi, and Arkansas. But the northern edge of those heavy rains got into southern Illinois and parts of Kentucky and Tennessee. North of that, we just had some widely scattered heavier pockets of rain, but it was widely scattered at best, but it persisted throughout the day on Tuesday. Meanwhile, a lot of severe storms, a lot of strong thunderstorms moving through the north central plains in the last few days and in the Canadian prairies, bringing in some much needed rain to some locations, but some very heavy rain and some severe weather to others. And a lot of thunderstorms kind of blowing up here in the mountains in the Four Corners region. Now, the reason why we talk about this to get things started is because of where we're going in this short-term forecast. One of the things I want to point out to you here is that the flow of the jet stream has retreated pretty far to the north, and it's got quite a few smaller features that we want to be paying attention to, mainly the shortwave that's moving through right now through the north central plains, and also this trough that's sneaking in from the Gulf of Alaska. Underneath it, a broad ridge is expanding in through here, and this is what's going to be the source of a lot of our heat in the coming days. But we need to talk about the position of that jet stream in the longer term forecast, its strength and its position. So we'll come back to that in just a few moments here. What I'll be watching very carefully is what's going to happen with the remnants of the storms that early in the morning on Wednesday were still moving through parts of the Dakotas over toward Minnesota and western Iowa, because it'll be the outflow from these thunderstorms we're going to watch carefully move across this region over the coming 48 hours that may spark quite a bit of thunderstorm activity. What you see over here is the remnants of Barry early in the morning here on Wednesday, still spreading some rainfall across the eastern part of the Corn Belt, getting into the northeast. So why I'm concerned about this is just getting you started at 6 a.m. here on Wednesday. I want you to watch what happens with the remnants of these thunderstorms as they press here toward the south and east. So if I click play, getting you through Wednesday afternoon and evening, we see a lot of squall line activity in through this corridor. So let me just stop that, play it again for you. See the storms moving through that area? And why this is crucial to watch is right now, at the same time that we're watching that particular motion in the upper levels of the atmosphere guiding these thunderstorms, we are going to be seeing the development of a pretty sizable heat wave. So just already from the weather.gov all hazards weather map, we see excessive heat watches, excessive heat warnings stretching through a major part of the center part of the United States. And this is like what I talked about in last week's video. This is the extended heat that I had originally forecast to kind of end around this time period. Well, this is the extra 6, 7, 8 days of this, maybe up to 10 days of heat that we're seeing here in this section of the country. So we need to talk about when this heat is done and where it is going, but certainly going to be hot in the middle part of the country and also hot here along parts of the East Coast. Okay. With that heat, remember, we will have storms racing through this part of the country. How far south and east they get, we're going to have to look at again in Thursday morning's video. But look at the evapotranspiration rates we're going to be getting here. So with the heat building into this corridor, we're expecting to see in there evaporation rates in parts of Texas that'll be getting up approaching 3 inches of rainfall, 3 inches of water out of the soil in a week. And anywhere you get these colors here and warmer, we're seeing more than 2 inches of evaporation. So this is coming at a time that if we don't get these thunderstorms coming through, we are going to be producing these flash drought conditions, which we talked about in our videos earlier this week. So it's crucial to see where those thunderstorms are going to go, and we're going to have to monitor them very carefully because part of this crop is in pollination right now. This corn crop is in pollination through some of the heart of the Corn Belt here. Okay, if we wanted the heat to be sustained through the rest of July and into August, we need a few things to happen. First, it'd be good to continue to see what we call the negative P&A pattern. That's where we have this deeper trough right in through here across the western part of the United States. It's also interesting that when we look back at some of our hottest Julys for the midsection of the United States, not only do they feature a big persistent ridge, which you would expect, but look at the flow around the rest of the world. We tend to have a positive NAO pattern, so see the larger ridge sitting here, and a deeper trough that kind of sneaks into parts of Western Europe. That's very common. In the Pacific Ocean, see the blues that we've got colored here? We're looking at low-level wind anomalies in terms of direction. And what we would see here is we would tend to see the Pacific Ocean behaving more a lot like La Nina than El Nino. So that'll be something to watch. So the stronger eastern winds here in the East Pacific would be something to be very paying close attention to as well. So if the heat that we were currently seeing was going to last like it did in 2012, 1980, 2002, those are some years you remember, or 2011, even 88, we would expect those three features to persist. And right now we see them in the near term, but not lasting too long. For example, we can see the broader trough north of Alaska and south of Alaska connecting right in through here. And that's one of the things that's helping to build the ridge in this area, plus this trough feature that is trying to develop over in this region. But the reality of it is once we get out past the end of this weekend, we're going to start to get some of the cooling happening next week. And we can see that part of the reason for that is because when we move out to that time period, we lose those dominant features. Our ridge moves more toward the west here, sending up into central Canada, so bringing warmth from the parts of Texas west to California and then north to central Canada, while the broader trough sneaks back in here. Now this is going to be finishing up our month, so we're talking here about 25th, 6th, 7th, 8th, getting at that time period. The other thing too is instead of troughing over Alaska, we're actually moving our trough more north of Siberia. So that's just out of the right configuration to get this heat to be sustained and stick around for a while. So what are we going to see? Well, yes, over the next 5 days, getting you through the weekend, a lot of excessive heat in through this area. Meanwhile, the jet stream, remember we have that trough that sneaks in like this, and that's going to keep parts of the Pacific Northwest on the cooler side of things. Again, I'm watching this same corridor for a lot of active severe weather. Now, after it passes early next week, let's take a look at the temperatures in the day 6 through 10 time period. We can start to see that broader flow pattern, which moves the ridge a bit west, allows for cooler weather to move into parts of the eastern half of the United States. We're going to return much closer to normal as we finish out the month of July here in terms of temperatures. Getting you farther out, let's go out to day 15 here. So this is July 31st. We still see a very similar story. Okay, the main ridge has slid back here to the west a bit, returning the heat to that region, and there's a broader trough feature sitting in through here. Although this is not the deep troughs that send us into cold summers here, this is one that's going to be bringing some relief to the heat in the eastern part of North America, while the western part of North America warms back up. You can see that pretty well here in the temperatures. I've got the this is the day 11 through 15 over here on the left from the European model, and then on the right from the GFS. And we can see that basically in this quarter the heat is starting to return, while temperatures here in the eastern part of the country for that time period here, getting us out to the very end of the month, are actually going to be returning to normal, and at times even being a degree or two below normal. So that is how things are going to be finishing up this month. Now the question is, do we have anything in the atmosphere to keep the heat going once we get into July? Well, into August. Well, let's first take a look at precipitation, and then we'll answer that question. I have some pretty good agreement here from the European model on the left and the GFS on the right on keeping this corridor right in through here very active with thunderstorms and also more than normal rainfall. Again, that's as that ridge slides in this direction, we end up getting those ridge riding storms on this side of it. The Gulf of Mexico is not getting shut down, so we're going to have to watch for the outflow of these storms to pass through much of the Corn Belt with time, even though you do see in both models kind of a band in through here that looks to be drier than normal over that time period. Again, I am not very impressed with the way that either model's handling what's going on down here in the southern region in terms of precipitation, and that's because I think the GFS is really missing out on the daily convective activity that will be happening there, which is very typical of this time of year. This is not a flow pattern that shuts down the southeast for rainfall. It's all wrong for that. So I think that the GFS model is way too dry in the southeast for what you see over here on the right. So now let's talk about the potential for sustaining, some heat as we get into the month of August. We talked about this last time, but just remember, right now we've still seen the fading El Nino event here since the beginning of June, and it really kind of bottomed out here once we got into the beginning of July. We can see the colder water temperatures that have emerged in this area, and the warmth is stuck out here, and it's kind of in this shape up in the North Pacific. In terms of the behavior of the winds down in the Central Pacific, which really help govern the flow of the jet stream across much of the North Pacific, we do see pockets. So this is not, this particular flow pattern in through here is not strong El Nino or La Nina. We have pockets of easterly winds and westerly winds kind of alternating. So this is a mixed signal coming out of our out of the open Pacific Ocean here near the equator, and that's important to know because that means we still don't have that. Well, we have neutral situation here. We don't have that strong El Nino base or La Nina at this point. So if we let that idea ride out into the month of August, I want to show you here the first week of August. And once we get to this time period, the European ensemble still has the majority of the ridge focused here over the Four Corners states. And therefore, it looks as though as we get into that first week of August, the heat will stay out in the western part of the United States and in southern Canada. It'll also be sitting there along, up here in the Gulf of Alaska, while the eastern half of the country is returning to much more normal conditions. Now, what's interesting is that as we press out into the middle of August, we do see the model trying to broaden out that ridge again. And there's some important features that are appearing here in the flow of the jet stream. Primarily, we start to see some troughing in through this area. And that is what why we start to see some broadening out of the warmer than average conditions getting back into the middle part of the country. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is that the cool off we're kind of seeing, I say cool off, it's a return toward normal temperatures that we're seeing here. After the heat breaks in the next week or so, it looks as though it might be around just until the beginning of August, and then might start going back over to warmer temperatures. Again, the lack of any signal out of the Pacific is supportive of this. Now, for persistent extreme heat and drought to turn back on full steam like we're seeing in the next couple of days, in other words, we're going to get that to come back on big time in August. These are the things I want you to watch with me because we're not yet fully getting the clear signal on it. If we get big troughing over the North Pole, Alaska, or Greenland, those three locations, that's one thing that allows heat to really build in the central United States. We're going to be looking for some La Nina-like behavior. That's much stronger easterly winds across the Pacific Ocean there. That would be good. Or if we went into a big positive North Atlantic oscillation. Also, when we talk about the Madden-Julian oscillation and other tropical features, we want what's called the velocity potential to look something a bit more like this. Again, I grabbed those hot years in August. We tend to see that this particular area has a lot of upper level suppression in its motion, so the air is actually sinking here and rising much more easily, not only over parts of Indonesia and Australia, but also over Africa as well. What do we see in the near term? Well, we don't see that happening. We're seeing that the Madden-Julian oscillation is a bit more supportive of the reduction in extreme heat with time, and that's what you see over here on the right-hand side, seeing these negative velocity potentials suggesting upward motion, which is important for the overall flow pattern. This does have an implication on our tropical systems as well. Of course, Barry was captured here by the European weeklies coming through this part of the United States, but outside of that, just looking over the next month, we do see drier conditions kind of stretching in this area purely from a tropical perspective. One of the big reasons for that is we're kind of shoving the subtropical ridge much farther out into the Atlantic, and that means if it stays there and stays as strong as it is, I bet we'd start to see any tropical systems that do develop maybe curl away from the United States before they could get to here. Again, this is an assessment based only upon the position of that high pressure system, but it's something we're going to be watching very carefully because that's what steers these tropical cyclones as they form. And again, we're moving now into the month of August here in the next 15 days or so, so we're going to be getting into a more active time period with the tropics. Okay, some bigger questions to answer about fall here. I just have two I want to finish up with. Is the rest of this summer shaping up like those cool summers we've talked about, some of the recent ones being 2009, 2004, and 2014? And then the second question, which we're actually going to address first here, is how are we doing on these GDD accumulations? Remember, we're starting this since June 1st. So over the last 45 days, you can see over here on the left, these are our temperature anomalies. So we actually have seen a corridor right in through this part of the country that has been cooler than average over that last 45 days or so. And of course, that's where we're still in deficit with respect to our GDD units in the United States. But the recent warmth we've seen spreading across much of the eastern part of the United States, especially into the Corn Belt here, has helped us catch up a bit. So since June 1st, if we're just looking at GDD anomaly since June 1st, you can see here a few locations are anywhere between 15 and 50 GDD units ahead of average. That again, talking about the Corn Belt here. That second question is about, is the rest of summer shaping up cool? Because we had some concern early that if we had a cool summer, this crop would never finish. So what I did was I put together the coolest June through October time periods for the primary corn and soybean belt, and I looked at a couple of things here. We have a lot of competing factors for this. If we look purely at ocean temperatures, which are decent longer range predictors, we'd want to actually see weak El Nino conditions here and warmth in that area. What do we have right now? Well, we certainly have the warmth in this region here. But we are seeing cooler waters emerge in this side and much warmer waters still hanging around in the Nino region 3.4. So that doesn't line up perfectly. Secondly, you can see we typically had much colder waters in the Arctic. We do not have that right now. But the only thing I can say is the cooler water anomaly here south of Greenland, well, we kind of have it, but it's a bit more split. So to say that the rest of summer is going to go back over to the cooler risk, where we just stay below average on temperatures for a longer time period, I cannot tell you with any certainty that that is a likely scenario. We certainly see that our longer range global models are not predicting that, but we do know that they have a warm bias. And I'm getting asked a lot, what do I think about the probability of an early frost? I cannot make that judgment call just yet. In fact, it's nearly impossible to make that judgment call at this point. So there's no plausible guidance, so we just need to kind of avoid thinking that we would be able to accurately predict an early frost at this particular stage. What I'm trying to tell you here is that there is not a lot of guidance at this point to suggest that we're going to go back over and stay on a much below average temperature pattern through the rest of summer. That particular signal is not strong at this point. Okay, certainly the fading El Nino is favorable for having an extended growing season, but again, that particular picture is not one that's perfectly painted at this point. Okay, so I'll finish up with just one last thing to show you here. This is from the IRI group out of Columbia University, and they take all of the global models that are out there and kind of do this interesting statistical blend on them. And when I mentioned that the global models are showing up with a bit of a warmer bias for our fall, we're looking here at September, October, November, and we do see that much of the United States is still on the most likely category here, being at above normal temperatures. So this is just suggesting that we've seen a bit of a trend here in the last month or so toward our global models suggesting an extended growing season. I'm not saying it's going to be the perfect thing that we need. I'm just saying that this is different from what we had earlier in the season, where there was major concern about the crop finishing. Okay, so just want to give you that latest perspective, and with that, I'll go ahead and wrap up this forecast video. We at Nutrien Ag Solutions thank you for your attention. Hope you look forward to next week's long range forecast. Got any questions? Put them right there in the comments. We'll get them answered. I'd love to interact with you and hear your feedback on these videos, so please make sure you do that. Have a great week. We'll talk to you soon. Thank you.